Hey, Ruben.
Hello.
Hey, Amy.
Good
How are you?
morning. Yeah, good, thanks. How you doing?
I'm good.
Busy week. No,
How are you doing? Is it already hot, or is it not too bad yet?
oh, it's boiling. Yeah,
Is
and
it?
I know like
What
everyone
did
in
what did it
delivery
get
keeps
to?
laughing at me. We're in like low 30s. I mean,
Yeah,
not
it's
right
still
now. Like
hot.
now, it's probably mid 20s. The
Yeah,
problem we have is after about 2 or 3 days of heat,
yeah,
everything's just trapped. So like my apartment just
yeah,
doesn't cool off. It will need
yeah.
like a solid
Where
week
are
of
you?
cool.
I forgot. Whereabouts are
I'm
you?
up in North London. So we've
Okay.
got kind of open space, so it's not. It could
Yeah,
be worse, definitely. But
yeah.
the problem we've got
Which
really is
suburb?
like Hackney,
Hackney. Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
keeping it classy. Yeah,
yeah.
Costa del Hackney, it's known as these
Uh,
days.
yeah.
Which
We've
the
got a flat.
joke
Well,
for Ruben
we've got a.
is like Hackney is like not somewhere you would go on holiday, right? Like Hackney is a pretty poor part of London. So yeah,
Oh,
Costa del
Hackney's
Hackney
like
is
super hipster.
yeah, it's getting better.
Yeah. I've got two flats in Bow, so pretty close
Nice.
by.
Yeah,
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 like
yeah.
not far.
So we went
But
through like a
they
big like climate change thing about, it was probably about what, 10, 15 years ago. And the government gave everyone
yeah.
loads of grants and things to really increase insulation on properties so that you don't need to heat them
Mm.
so much. So everyone, like all modern buildings now are like fully insulated against like cold weather. And when you get a heat wave, it's not what you wanted to do. So
Don't even talk to me about insulation in apartment blocks in because our one is basically now unsellable and like the bank
yeah.
doesn't want to know anything about it. It's like a
Yeah,
total
we ours
disaster.
has gone
Because
really
it
quiet. Like there's just
really,
someone in our place was like, "Do we actually have a fire safety certificate?" So for Ruben, maybe missed the first versions of this. Since the Grenfell tower fire, virtually all tower blocks in the UK have the same flammable cladding on the outsides, which you can't get insured anymore. Tower blocks need to have like fire safety certificates, which you pretty much can't get. Yeah, it went really quiet in our
no.
place when someone said, "Do we actually have a fire safety certificate?" No one's managed to confirm or not. So at some point, we're
The insur
expecting the bill.
Yeah, the insurance on the block on the apartment, so the building insurance went from like 50 grand a year to 400 grand a year. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's,
because you basically have to rebuild it from scratch, right? Like if there is a
yeah,
fire, your
yeah.
building's gone, right? So
It's about 1 million. That's what they've priced it out for us and everything. But we've had all these experts. We keep having these calls, these Zoom calls, and we keep having these experts on, and they're like we've seen some bad situations, but this is one of the worst because the freeholder was also the managing agent, and it's all collapsed. And oh, anyway, is anyone
really,
coming on this call?
I'm
Yeah.
hoping Graham is,
Oh, there,
yeah.
Graham. Oh, cool.
Summoned.
Hey,
Andrew
Graham.
literally just said, "Is anyone coming
Hey,
on this
how's it
call?"
going?
Literally as you joined. So we just
Yeah,
have it.
you just. There was actually a puff of smoke as your picture came onto the Zoom.
Cool.
How you doing, Graham?
Yeah, not too bad. How's everyone? It seems like if I look at the wall, it's like, at the X amount of days since a S1 incident. I think we're up to like maybe, 12 hours now without an S1 incident?
Yeah,
That's being
yeah,
optimistic.
Yeah.
yeah. It actually is. Yeah. Um, So well timed though for this. So rather than a demo, I mean, happy for you to show stuff as well, Graham, if you have stuff. But I thought it would actually be useful to follow on from the Slack thread that started up yesterday around Kate's workloads rollout process. So I should find the link. So what we talked about briefly yesterday was following following the incident with the artifact uploads, we changed the Kate's workload
Yep.
documentation so that one thing that was tricky on that incident was we didn't have a great audit trail. Like it wasn't super clear for the SRE on call, like what had changed. So we've added in a step on this in the documents that basically all of these MRs will have a change issue associated with them. So that was all we've changed so far. There was a discussion, in fact, Jav put the MR together. Did we merge in the MR to make the tests blocking job?
They are.
Yeah.
I haven't caught up. I assume Starbeck probably
cool.
merged
Yeah.
it. Graham, you had some reservations about this.
Sure, I
Before
did.
we go
Before we
into the
discuss into that,
reservation-
I'll let Amy finish.
Well,
Sure.
yeah, I was going to say, actually, before that, one thing that would be really helpful is, could we just do a quick overview of how the k8s workload rollout process looks? Because that might help all of us, I think.
Yeah. So I can go, I understand this pretty well because I designed most of it way back when we first put it together and stuff. And I designed it going off various experience and thoughts I had, which I now realize were actually incorrect, but I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But how it actually works is, so we've got a few different steps now, but basically more or less we run essentially a diff against the environment. So for every single environment we have, we just what with this change at the state, what you're committing, what is this diffing actually against the real environment? And then we do more or less on when you merge to master, we do an apply, and that apply goes over different stages. So I think it does pre and staging in one group, and then we have QA tests and pre-tests depending, and then we have canary, and then we have production, but production is now split down into the regional cluster, zonal cluster B, and then after those are complete and successful, zonal cluster C and D. And I think that mostly works fine, but there's there's a couple of critical points, and maybe I'm getting a little bit too far ahead, but I will point them out now. A lot of these systemic issues are around the fact that the way Helm file sets up, arguably Helm file and everything sets up, is that it's and how GitLab CI works and based off how normal software code works is when you touch a file, when you change a specific file in that repo, there is a very complex web of determining what environments that file will change, if that makes sense. You can, because we have one file, we have this inheritance model, all of these values touch every environment. These values only touch staging. These values only touch canary. But then on top of that, the Helm chart takes those values and further translates them and all those different things. We have other sources. Obviously, we pull values from Chef as well. So we have all these external dependencies, which could feed changes into that, even though you're not expecting those changes to be fed in. When I designed all that, I was working off a model of Argo CD and Flux CD, which are Kubernetes deployment tools that are based off the GitOps model of apply time run. So they're very much more like a pull model and once you commit, you apply. It's not a CI/CD workflow. It's slightly different, which is fine for that model. But translating that to a CI/CD model over the last year now, especially, we've started to see that model fall apart. The big thing I see in particular is we have to run jobs to diff every single environment. We have to run jobs that apply every single environment. And the only way GitLab CI can intelligently determine what jobs we should skip or not skip and what order we should do things are based off what files change in the repo. But as I already talked about it, we have some files that will touch everything, but even though if you touch that file that touches everything, it may not actually end up touching an environment. If that there's just so much complexity around where you change something of what actually changes on a real environment. That I think is a real systemic problem that a lot of these other issues tag off of. And I think the biggest way we get around that is moving to a model where what is actually, so kind of technically inside the repo, we want somewhere where it's like a staging area or the final files that are rendered that are actually applied to the cluster is separate from this execution model and pulling in variables at runtime, if that makes sense. So the classic example is the runbooks repo with the JSON stuff. You can modify the JSON source files, you run a make generate, and you have to push all of that into one merge commit. But that allows GitLab CI to allow allows us to use GitLab CI to intelligently determine what jobs we need to run, because you're only worried about the final, like if you just go off what files, the rendered final product that's changed, you use them to apply to the cluster. And because they're in Git, we can use GitLab to track if these files have changed, launch a job. If the pre-file has changed, we launch a pre-job. If there's no pre-job changes, then we don't need to do QA for pre. And so my problem with the current approach now, and I'm not even saying overall it's a big problem, but what this side effect is because we don't have that tight control, and by introducing QA and staging into the pipeline, is I can make a change that only affects production, but our pipeline will still run jobs against staging and pre to a degree. And if they fail, and myself, and I know I won't call out names, but other people in Asia Pacific get this frustration because we're so isolated from other people who can help us with this, that I'm trying to roll out a production change that's gone through staging. It's all fine. It's in a change request. And then I go and merge, and all of a sudden a random failure in staging is stopping my pipeline from applying to production. And so now I'm in the middle of a change request, and I've got to start going down a rabbit hole of fixing either skipping the tests or it's like the model of I have a merge request that only affects production, or I have a merge request that only affects staging, and our testing pipeline is not a one-to-one off my intention, and it's a fault in the tooling and how we've set it up.
So in terms of the tests, so these are the QA smoke tests. Is that one?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a bit of a contrived use case. It doesn't happen a lot, but it's totally could happen that I've done these MRs and pre and staging, and it's fine. And I've got the change request. That's fine. I've talked to EOC, and they've approved it. And then the change request will be, now please merge your production change request and apply that. So I merge that, goes onto ops.gitlab.net. The pipeline runs. It does a QA. First of all, it's doing like a state now real run QA test and staging. They could fail, and I can't actually roll out my production change just because an arbitrarily test that's unrelated to this change in staging fails. And to be clear here, I'm not against this change as an immediate reaction as to what's happened this week, but I'm just highlighting this is a problem that can happen. And I understand the problem is our repo setup and our pipeline setup is wrong because.
Oh no, I was actually going to say, Graham, I think the problem is our process, right? So I think what we should do, these are the tests we run for auto deploys, right? So they are stable. We run them regularly. Now, I appreciate what you're saying, that when they fail, they're super hard to debug. What I think the gap is that we, and kind of how we've talked a little bit, we don't have quality super close to infra. And I think we should solve that, right? So quality have on call, and they're very responsive, but they don't have 100% coverage.
Quality have on call.
Zones. Yeah, you have quality on call. Yeah. They have a couple of people, primary and secondary, who we can escalate to. Problem is they don't have someone across all time zones. So they do have people in APAC, but I think that's the bit we should tighten up. So we should put our tests in place, trust the smoke test. Yes, we will get blocked, but we should work with quality to what's our process to getting ourselves unblocked for this stuff.
But wait, one sec before you continue. Graham, you said unrelated change blocks or unrelated failure blocks your change.
Yeah.
So two things. One is, how do you know, how are you absolutely certain that that's not related? The system is very large, so it's really hard to know whether your change breaks something in a completely opposite end of the system, right? Like that's one. And number two, we always should have a flip switch, right? Like if you are absolutely certain, if you went through, a couple of people verify this, QA helped you out, verify that, oh yeah, this is really unrelated, we saw this in another place and so on, you should be able to flip a switch and say, I'm skipping this, approvals are here one way or another, whatever that means, I'm moving on with more eyes on this problem, right?
I think one thing I've seen is that you can be absolutely sure when there are no changes to staging, but QA runs in staging. And this happens occasionally when, maybe Graham, you kind of described this, when you're when you're making a change in staging, so you update the staging YAML file, and now you want to make that change into production. So you move that change into the common YAML file. But we recognize that as a change that affects all environments.
Staging. Yeah, sure.
So even though there were no diffs for staging, we're going to run QA because it's in the change list in CI.
Sure.
In that case, there were 0 changes for staging, but we still run QA, and if there's a QA failure, then you can
sure.
be pretty sure it's not related.
Right. So I think it sounds like we need a bit of a process around the QA tests failing and how we deal with that. We need to have a way of overriding, and we also need to have a way of logging this stuff, right? So exactly the same we do with auto deploys, right? We can override our auto blocks, but when we do, we document it and we have that log somewhere. So it sounds like we just need to put, it doesn't have to be that level of depth, but we just need somewhere where we're tracking that stuff. Like maybe like with the change issue be an appropriate place, like we're going to have that linked to all of that's kind of out audit trail for now, right?
Yeah, I guess maybe. Yeah, like I guess that is the thing. Like you're correct, Job. Obviously, the big one is if you move it into the common file. I actually do agree with that use case in that I've moved it into the common file because it touching is a common file that's affected by all environments. I don't have too much of a problem with that. I think it's definitely yeah, it's a small use case, and I'm as I said, I'm not even like against any of this. I'm just calling it out because there has been frustrations because stuff like this has happened in other repos for us. It's just hard when you're absolutely confident a change is not like if I don't know. Yeah, I'm not even sure entirely what I'm trying to say is, but we could work on our repo. You know, I've got the proposal there for redoing the repo in some respects, and I think that's what I'm trying to get down to ultimately is
Graham,
this is a
you're firing 300 things in a second, so it's kind of hard to understand you right now.
Sure.
So
let me. Sorry.
Maybe regroup for a sec while Andrew is saying, because like I would like to hear like one train of thought, because right now you're starting 4, so it's kind of hard to follow. Sorry about that.
just like one of the things that I was thinking about was the environments, and this I was thinking about particularly in the context of last night's incident. The environments are not that similar, frankly. I'm gonna be they're pretty different, and over time they drift. And what about that? This would cost us money, but you know what else costs us money? Incidents. If we had almost exactly the same environment except for secrets in staging, and obviously with Kubernetes we set the minimum number of pods down, like that's like an easy optimization. But other than that, the configuration that you apply to staging and the configuration you apply to production is the same, and there's a cost involved with this. And I think we've always said, oh, that's too expensive, but you know, we're getting big now, and we can't keep, and that would make what you're talking about, I think, Graham, like much easier, because effectively you've got one config and you're applying it to 2 environments, and the thing is always, oh, that costs us too much money. And so maybe we should challenge that. Just throwing that out there.
Andrew, are you sure that it's about, like, I remember that, right? I know the discussions from a couple of years ago about this being about money. Let's not, right now, honestly, let's not think about that, right? Like, let's not spend 100K a month, but let's also not think about that part.
But can you give me another good reason why we're not doing it then?
The environments are really hard to, for them to be actually similar, right? Like, because the database size is different, the data set inside of the other environment is different, load is different. All of those things add.
And one extra is that as we roll out the config changes, so one of the big differences we've seen this week is the new registry database coming in. So that's still going to be coming in, right? We can't have an environment for every single different config change rolling through to production.
Yeah.
So I think data size is definitely different between the environments. The actual configuration delta. Sorry.
We can manage around the data size. I think that's a fairly trivial thing to.
The configuration drift between staging and production has drifted, but yeah, I actually agree with you, Andrew. They shouldn't. Like, they really shouldn't have drifted possibly as much as they have. I don't know how we can rein that in. Although it is easier in Kubernetes because like now all of a sudden we do actually have everything in the one repo.
Yeah.
If I'm collecting my thoughts a little bit now, what I guess all I'm trying to imply is that, so now that every pipeline is likely to have testing and staging, that's okay. That all I'm just saying is that even if I only do changes in production, like just the way our repo is set up and unfortunately how we've implemented some things, we have to overdo the amount of jobs we have in CI, which is fine. That's obviously the safe way to do it. I do think ultimately I could rewrite that repo and change things around so that would be more efficient and better, both for using it, like detecting configuration drift, and actually in efficiency of the CI jobs. Like we could change it to, you know, like a rendering model, like the runbooks repo. So we can just, you know, you just run like a make generate. It generates the Helm file with all the values in one single file per environment. So we'd have like eight files.
Yeah.
But you commit it
and
all at once.
There's no common files. Yeah.
No, exactly. That's what.
Exactly,
Yeah, there's
yeah.
no common files. Maybe there's a common like source where they come from, but they're rendered out one by one, completely
the
isolated.
JSON it can have lots of the more commonality in the
whatever.
JSON, the better, but not in the YAML.
Exactly, and then we can, and then you could literally do canary pipelines. I think we could do canary based off canary changes, stage based off stage, QA based off QA. I'm actually, that was my actual overall train of thought, is there's problems with the way we currently do this. I know there are problems, and they're problems by design. I actually know how we could fix them. So I'm not sure if now is the time, but I definitely think I just want to bring it to the attention moving forward. I think we could change this to make it even safer and better for people.
Graham, just one question for you. Sorry, Andrew. I want to kind of visualize what you're saying. So basically, you want to. So the runbooks repo has like the generate command. It templates out basically everything you need, right? Like you're gonna have like one file per environment, and then basically using our CI, you can say, oh, only this file actually changed, so run only this thing, right?
Would you like me to show you some work I've been doing
no,
on this?
No, not necessary. I think we have a lot to discuss, but one question that comes with that though, how do you ensure that you always test your changes in prior environments? Like, will that be enforcement on the reviewer or on the other pipelines or general process change? Like, that's another question I have.
So that is completely separate from the concept of splitting MRs to, so I think to answer your question is, I don't think technically I can enforce, or we could do a bit of tooling to say, hey, this MR touches more than one environment. So if I don't know, if multiple files are changed across environments, we probably want to flag that, right? Similar to how we have the chef one that like, it puts a big warning when you like touch a lot of servers and things like that. So we could do automation around that easier in this kind of model, but there's no inherent built-in kind of stuff unless I'm not aware of that.
No, but you can enforce it by the way that you structure the libraries in JSON, right? So you could say that you basically have like features or something like that, and you say this feature, like we're talking about the delta of CAS or the container registry Redis or something like that, and then in the base environment you basically say this is on or this is off, but you can't kind of like completely customize per each environment. You've got you structure the code in such a way that you make it very difficult to diff, right? It's basically toggles. So canary is like these toggles on, and production is these toggles on, and when you promote something, it's effectively flicking that switch, and that you enforce through the code and through merge request reviews. But it's kind of quite deep, but that's how you would do that, I think, if you were doing it in JSON. And another thing that I think would be really important is that at the moment we'd have JSON. We'd also have like YAML entities and like that hellscape, and then also Golang template stuff. And if we could kind of simplify that down to, first of all, I think just get rid of YAML entities, like, please. And then the files that you actually get out of the end of it are these really, really boring specs, YAML Helm files that are very easy to read. You don't need to cross-reference with different environments, and I think it would be safer.
Yeah,
So is that
that's I
a
agree.
short-term thing, right? Because I guess I want to just keep us
Yeah.
focused. Like, if the biggest action we have is the one you suggested, Andrew, which is finish the migration, how do we prioritize between these two? Like, is it enough for now that we use change requests and put the test to blocking, or do we need to do other stuff before we continue with the web migration?
I think we should just go. I think we should, the number one priority be before any other changes, Frank, personally, is get the web done, because we have at the moment every conversation we have is prefixed with, this is what we'll do for the Kubernetes environment. And there's so much cognitive overhead. Every change is like a set of changes. And that was a major contributing factor to last night. The reason why it didn't go through staging was because that would have meant like another 6 or 8 merge requests, right? And it's just too much change. There's too much cognitive overhead on people to think about all this stuff. And then also, in Canary, we caught the change because it wasn't, Helm didn't roll it out because it was broken. So Kubernetes has got the mechanisms to catch this problem. And so that is our first line of defense, and it's the most boring thing we should do. And we should just do that first, I think. And then once we're there, we don't have to say, well, this is what we're going to do, but we're going to have to make other plans for Chef and Omnibus. It's just this environment. Obviously, there's Redis and everything like that, but most of these kind of horrible changes are in the application.
And I want to add to what Andrew's saying there, that even when we're starting to have discussions now about what we need to do next, the discussions include how to sort this out for the VMs and how to sort this out for Kubernetes. And we're already trying to think about how to resolve this twice. Rather than trying to resolve it twice, we should just de-risk it and move forward with trying to get this into Kubernetes.
Yeah, the biggest cause here was cognitive overhead.
That happened in another incident recently as well, where somebody asked me, like, can we do this to Sidekick? And then the stuff started like, where is staging? How does that look in staging? You do the change in staging. Is that the same in production? Not really.
There was the incident that was last week when the on-call engineers were trying to reason about it on staging, but there was reasoning about it on the VMs on staging versus Kubernetes on staging versus the VMs in production and Kubernetes in production, all of which were in different phases of the rollout. So it was very difficult, again, to try and keep not only 2 environments in your head, but across 2 different stages.
Technologies, yeah.
So
yeah,
why is
go ahead.
like I don't disagree with any of that. I'm curious as what we've got left in Sidekick and VMs. Like, we should be mostly done, right? Like, I thought we have.
That's more of a, I think it's by accident some stuff is left there, but after the, like, it's, I think Sean has it planned in the whole migration. Like, when we're done with this 1 queue per shard thing, one of the last steps there was just clean up the VMs and put these things in Kubernetes. But jobs were in VMs before because we needed to wait for stuff to migrate them, and then we haven't gotten back to it. Jarv, do you think
Just want to make this clear, like, it's not by accident, right? Like, there were reasons why Sidekick VMs were left behind,
yes.
And that's all of them had to do with the application not being able to support the new platform, right? So we needed to isolate some of these things and leave them out. So that's the only thing I want to clarify.
Yes, and the thing, like, so we left them out, we left them on VM. One of the reasons was shared folders and stuff. We haven't looked back at it yet. So now we've just tagged these workers again. So the project that we are working on now wouldn't move them around. But we plan on looking at it again to, like, get rid of those VMs after this project.
That makes sense. So I
just
think
in
if I want
terms
to,
of next steps on actually progressing on the Kubernetes, web migration. So the big one, and maybe a good one for us to see if we can get people to help us today and tomorrow, is, so one of the incidents we had this week was around mounting of the temp files to allow the asset uploads. Is that correct? And that is our short-term mitigation around the sort of actual proper web blocker that's prioritized for fix in 14.3. So under 3B, I've dropped in, this is the issue that we need to get resolved before we can actually, like that's our current web blocker, right?
Assuming
Okay,
that,
so go ahead, Graham.
I was going to say, yeah, assuming, so it's either they fixed,
Stan
I think they,
fixed it.
yeah, I don't know if there's two problems. We have to fix one of the two.
There's
So
two parts to this fix as well, right? So there's a charts change we need to make as well.
What, Amy, is there like an open issue? Because the issue I've clicked on is closed.
Yeah, that's the one that Stan closed 2 hours ago.
Oh, sorry, I meant to give you the incident. Hang on a sec.
So it's resolved.
So he resolved the bug that caused the error with the workaround. So in theory, what that means is we could try the workaround again, because the workaround is what caused the outage. So, I mean, it's still a workaround, but yes, in theory, when
so
unblocked.
with the actual the single source of truth bug, the core bug, the actual thing that we're working on, where's that? And can we get it onto InfraDev and make it a P1S1 InfraDev issue? Because I haven't, it's not in my stack. I don't know if I'm aware of it.
Yeah, it's on the multi-large working group, but yeah, I'll dig that out and get that to you, Andrew. Working that.
Thanks. Or you can just put an InfraDev label on it.
I'll
and
put an
it'll come up
InfraDev
in all
label.
my
Yeah,
reports.
okay, great.
S1P1 and reference the incident as well.
Yeah. So just in terms of it, we'll still probably need to do some workaround. Like they predicted a 2-month fix for that one. So it's not a quick, as currently understood, it's not a quick fix, right?
Let's see the issue.
We can
Did you both just
push
say
those
what
ahead.
to say? Okay.
Look, there are some backend engineers in this call as well. So I'm not going to pick people who are in this call, but what I want to say is that we do have mandate to stop everything that needs to be stopped.
Yeah, Ruben's going to fix it straight after this.
Yes.
So then what so to wrap things up, I guess, from the earlier discussion and everything. So I'm okay with the changes and everything we've done with k8s workloads in the repo now gives us the maximum amount of safety, which is what we need. I was highlighting there is deficiencies in how it's done now, suboptimal. However, once again, I do also identify the way we would do that better, but it's significant, not even significant, maybe a week's worth of work. It's a restructuring of that entire repo and workflow, which it sounds like we probably shouldn't do now. And I actually do agree with that. We should keep focused on the web migration and possibly even other bits like Sidekick. And we should really focus on doing the migration as much as possible. If I want to give a quick update on where we are at with the web migration. So obviously it's been running like all of staging has been running 100% web in Kubernetes now. We've had flakiness with different tests, which is what I spent time looking at and basically kind of paralyzed me a little bit. But we're kind of over that now. As of today, everything looks good. There were some problems with staging because of the database hosts were all configured wrong with console. We had was basically out of memorying itself constantly because it was set so small. All these things seem to be resolved. So we're in a good state there. Skarbek and myself now should be looking at getting to Canary. I've been working through the configuration audits for today. So the configuration audit, like how do we set stuff in VMs? How is it set in Kubernetes? What's the differences? By and large, it looks good, but I have identified some critical things we need to check and basically confirm. So going off the post-mortem of the API migration, this configuration drift, missing things out, parting the migration was apparently a big risk / a cause of problems. Maren, with your suggestion now to move towards like doing the change requests in a way that we do them like a vertical silo, like like we actually kind of calling out each environment in those change requests, I think is great. I'm actually thinking now in general, and if we have enough time to quickly discuss this, we take that one step further. And so far we've done the migrations in an environment like this. Like we've been like, we do all a pre, we try and get pre completely solid. Then we move to staging, then it's completely solid. And we just find so many differences with the environment. Maybe we do try that more vertical approach. So what I'm thinking is, instead of us saying, we're gonna try and put web into Canary, we try and put it into Canary and production and do one change request for both. What do I mean like that? So I mean, we do a change request to add nodes to Canary and production for web. We do a change request to turn on web pods in Canary and production in one change request. Even if we send 0 traffic for another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it doesn't matter. We get everything there now. So if I come back and I'm like, oh, I found there's a license problem in pre, I can go and check the license problem in prod. Because what I have at the moment is all these problems I find, I don't know if they're going to be problems in production, because there's nothing in production for me to check against at the moment. So we switched to a model where we're going to do every single step will be done in every single environment across the board, rather than us trying to do it from pre-staging upwards, if that makes sense. That's my theory. I'm happy to be shut down.
I think it's a good idea. And you're talking about basically deploying web without taking traffic, but you do have to realize that, you're going to have Puma running in production and connecting to the database in Redis, and you have to be mindful of that.
Good point. Maybe.
So
what if we do it like we run
think,
it in production, but one pod? Like we set
yes,
the
that's
max
exactly
pods.
what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Let's just take it very, very slow. Maybe do a max of 1 or 2, and that would be safe. But let's not blow out. We just need to be careful.
You're
before
right.
we blow out the number of pods.
That's a good point. But I think that, so at least that way we were less likely to miss configuration problems, because when I fix a configuration problem, I should be trying to compare it and fix it in every single environment at once. I think definitely from web pages, I think we should do it like this as well. We should be like, okay, day one, we're going to turn on web page. Like if we want to build nodes to take web pages, let's do it in every single environment and with a change. Let's actually do the steps we need in all environment and treat them at some kind of proper level, rather than trying to work upwards, because the environments are so different. You fix a problem in one, you forget about it by the time you roll in production because it was a month ago and things like that. Obviously tuning the levels of production pods to be sensible, and staging, I guess.
Yeah, okay, let's make sure when we retro on this, we capture those thoughts, make a plan for pages. In terms of, we've just got a few minutes left for this meeting. So I just want to wrap up, do we know next steps for web migration? I think everyone happy with that? Jav, do you want to just go through, verbalize the process changes you've added in under
I don't want to read it. Just does anyone have any objections to any of those bullet points?
So my only question is, I think the wording there was 1 merge request per environment. That's fine. So does that mean even for pre and stage, which aren't production, we should do separate ones?
Non-prod and prod. So
okay,
I guess
sure.
Let's just do non-prod.
That was my only question.
Yep. Everything else looks reasonable.
Yep.
Okay, great. I think, do you think it's overkill or you think it's okay?
I think until, once again, I think we can restructure things to make it safer and better all around. I think this is the best we can do right now.
I think we're doing most of this already most of the time. And then maybe with a few exceptions. So yes, I think it's,
yeah.
Okay.
Jav, what about do we need to kind of interface with the chef changes?
I know, because I've had examples recently of an environment variable we need to add in chef, and then someone oh yeah, we need to make this in k8s workloads too. If there's a corresponding chef, but we often do this. We can make that more explicit.
But maybe just formalize it, just include it in the thing that you should reference the chef changes, the staging and chef should be the same, right? But the staging chef change should map and
Yeah.
production one. And
That's one
Yep.
change, but one change issue, multiple merge requests, all referenced everywhere.
yeah.
Got it.
I think like for the change request, we're saying for all production changes, we need to have a change request at a minimum. And we're also saying that maybe if you're making it in non-prod and prod, you would have a change request that would reference both, I think.
So so does this include, like, the problem that I always find with these statements is that they're very, like, what does all production changes mean? So does it mean any change to chef repo? Does it mean any change to run books? You know, like there's a long tail of things that people kind of on an ad hoc basis decide what is production change and what isn't.
We're keeping, as far as I know, we're keeping it specific to the web migration for production. Like not all changes, as far as I know, right, Amy, or not? Or is this?
I think so. What we said based on yesterday, if everyone's still happy with that, is Webfleet, not just migration, but Webfleet changes.
But for chef as well.
All environments, but at least production, right?
I mean, that's a big change we need to socialize to all SREs, because I think you know, we make frequent changes to chef repo.
Let's just keep it simple. Yeah. We want to respond to what we've got so we can keep moving forward. So let's just keep it simple. And web migration, we're specifically concerned about the k8s workloads going out, particularly once we complete this migration. That stuff gets even more risky. So let's keep it focused there.
Graham, do you find yourself iterating on non-prod changes over and over again before? I guess right now you're kind of in that mode. So this is where it's a bit weird, right? Because not every non-prod MR is going to have a prod MR, because you're probably going to batch up the changes, or how will that work?
Well, once again, this is the tricky part, right? So if I'm, you know, obviously the change that caused the outage was wrong. Like there was no reason for us to make that change in production. It was just kind of, it was a bad judgment call. So pushing that aside, at the moment I'm like doing a lot of stuff in non-prod, and like it's not really a change request because I know I'm going to be iterating non-prod, and then eventually, right, we're going to get web into Canary and production, and then it's going to be a cut and paste job. But as I was saying before, I'm happy to kind of flip it now and let's try and get something running in. I'm actually okay to get something into Canary and prod. And then even if I am changing anything for Canary and stage, I kind of have to do a change request, because chances are I'm also changing it for prod. Like I'm actually okay to push myself into change control territory deliberately, because it will simplify what I'm trying to synchronize across all the environments, if that makes sense. So I'm okay with, what I'm trying to say is I'm okay with the overhead if I'm actually making changes into like if I'm actually doing work that is going to make it into production one day, if that makes sense. I feel like I haven't explained it well, but
I think we should just
we're fine to keep going and see, let's review it if it's a super block, right? The idea is to make it safer but not slow us down, so we can push on with web migration. Great.
I mean, it sounds like, if I'm reading this now, like as at the moment, we've got no production things for web. So despite, like, this change shouldn't have gone into production. It just didn't need to in general. But doing the right thing, I'll be changing things in non-production. I won't be having change requests. That's fine. But, you know, in the next week or so, we're probably going to have stuff in Canary in production, and I will be pulled into doing change requests for those. But that's fine, because chances are any changes I'm going to make to non-prod, I will eventually make in prod. And so that's fine to me.
Great. Right. So I need to drop. Thank you so much, everyone. Jav, would you, should we work together on getting this into the
that's
guides, so we get this documented?
I have to run, but after lunch I can, maybe we can start an MR for just
okay, great.
contributing for this. That sounds good.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, great. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Speak soon.